We shall fight in the field.
Mit der Akzeptanz der
C'est pas parce que les
vier
Britanniques
Grundfreiheiten und dazu gehört
ont
auch
décidé
die
de sortir qu'ils ne doivent pas être
Freizügigkeit der
associés à ce
Personen.
processus.
Brexit means Brexit.
Hello and welcome to another Brexitometer, brought to you by the Martin Centre, coming to you from London, a city in lockdown for the past almost 2.5 months. You can tell by my hair, there's no hairdresser is open, so no haircut for me. It's been a really long time. The COVID pandemic is unfolding in the UK. It's slowly turning from a health crisis into first an economic crisis. Everybody knew that, but now also a political crisis. At the time of recording this, according to some measurements, the UK probably has had up to 60,000 excess deaths, perhaps 60,000 victims of the pandemic during this wave. Definitely a very, very bad performance. And now the pressure is slowly building up on the Boris Johnson government about what to do with this. However, cases are also coming down a bit, so now we're slowly moving into the next stage of business, trying to figure out what the world will look like after the pandemic. What does this all mean about the developments in Brexit as we enter crunch time? The second half of 2020 will determine the future shape of the UK-EU relationship. The Brexitometer or Covidometer or Lockdownometer, however you want to call it, is here to give you all the answers. So where are we with Brexit as such? There is actually movement. The negotiations have been going on. They have probably picked up pace a bit between Michel Barnier and the British representative. There has been another round of negotiations in June, but all these negotiations until now, all they do on the technical level between the two negotiators are to basically, for both sides, to basically reaffirm that they are very, very far apart from each other. We know the topics by now. It's fisheries, it's government aid to businesses, it's access to the single market, it's social and health standards. On all those things, the UK is basically always saying that it wants maximum possible independence. And the EU is telling the UK that if it wants independence, then there won't be the possibility of as close economic ties as exist now. And of course, the crux of the matter is that the Boris Johnson government has also completely excluded the possibility of an extension beyond December 31st, 2020. The EU side also is complaining that the British side really does not appear to be engaging in any good faith about trying to reach an agreement. So from where we're standing now, these negotiations are moving along, and they're moving along also away from lots of publicity, because most of the publicity is dedicated to the pandemic. So those negotiations really are not leading anywhere. Is there any chance of breaking the deadlock, of reaching a no-deal Brexit basically at the end of 2020? The next major step probably is the EU summit at the end of June. Of course, one thing we have to understand is that Brexit and the UK are the least of the EU's concerns now. The EU also has its major problems to deal with now, with the major economic crisis caused by the pandemic, but it is expected that EU leaders will discuss Brexit at the end of June in that summit. There have been some recent reports that perhaps because the EU knows that a no-deal Brexit would be very, very painful for it as well, and it's really not in the great shape to deal with shocks, and however much bigger the EU is from the UK, it still will suffer quite substantially from a no-deal Brexit. There have been reports that maybe we will see in that EU Council the first signs of a political will, a political movement that will then inform the negotiating strategy of Michel Barnier to find some wiggle room towards British demands in order to save the deal, to have a deal before the end of 2020. But until we reach that point where political leaders in the EU Council will make some kind of a decision or not, we'll have to wait and see. At this point, Brexit negotiations are pretty much stalled. If you don't hear about them, no news, it's because there's actually no news. The sides have not moved and the negotiations are pretty much frozen at this point. So if you're sitting in Europe as I guess many of you are, and you're trying to figure out what exactly goes on in the UK right now, what informs the attitude of the British government, especially in light of the pandemic crisis and economic crisis that follows the lockdown. What can we say about that? That's a pretty good question. Before the pandemic, it was pretty self-evident. It was a given that the two sides were starting from very, very rigid positions, and that the Boris Johnson government really appeared to be talking business. It really appeared that it meant it when it said that it was going for full independence from the EU with a very real chance of no-deal Brexit at the end of the transition period, at the end of 2020. Has the pandemic changed that at all? Well, there's basically two sides to the story in London, and it's mostly hunches, it's mostly sentiments, evaluations. We don't really know what's going to happen, but it's really just about trying to read the tea leaves more than anything. One notion is that the pandemic is actually not that bad if you're a government that was after no-deal Brexit all along. Remember that having no agreement at the end of 2020 would mean major economic disruption, major economic problems, perhaps causing a recession. There was always going to be a problem for the Boris Johnson government, how to hide that, how to manage that, how to show that actually Brexit does not produce benefits immediately, but actually economic costs. Well, if you have a major economic decline, major economic recession because of the pandemic, and it is expected that the UK will suffer quite a bit from the economic aftermath of the pandemic, isn't that a nice way to hide the impact of Brexit? Isn't it a nice way to basically hide all the negative economic indicators that will happen from a no-deal Brexit anyway, within an already pretty negative economic environment that the government has already using all its resources to manage? The other side of the story is that this is complete lunacy. This is crazy. The government always knew that a no-deal Brexit was going to be very dangerous. Boris Johnson always showed that he was ready to compromise if it served his political interests. He compromised on the withdrawal agreement. And basically the pandemic is offering a way out from what was always a very impossible position for the UK government. Opinion polls show that most British people are actually willing to accept an extension because of the pandemic and the economic crisis caused by the pandemic. There's also practical issues. It emerged in the news that all the emergency medical equipment and material that the government had stockpiled precisely for the case of a no-deal Brexit, to have medicine and medical equipment in case of a no-deal Brexit. Actually, this has completely run out because of the pandemic. So the pandemic has shown how perilous a no-deal Brexit would be in practice. Which of the two will happen? We ultimately don't know. There are logics to both sides of the story, using the pandemic to hide the negative consequences of a hard Brexit and basically using it as an excuse to do a hard Brexit that the government always promised, or using the pandemic as a pretty good excuse not to do a hard Brexit and therefore avoid appearing as having given up on a major promise. Either works. The only thing certain is that whichever of the two happens, Boris Johnson will have to use his utmost salesmanship to sell it to a population that is becoming more and more weary and more tired after a really, really bad pandemic crisis here. So that was another episode of the Brexitometer. Lots of uncertainty. The UK and the EU are pretty much very far apart from each other. Both sides appear to really mean it, that they are willing to go all the way to a no-deal hard Brexit at the end of 2020. The UK does not want to ask for an extension. It's not really certain that the EU also wants to see the UK asking for an extension. The EU is going out through its own motions, trying to design its new recovery fund, its new EU budget. Having an extension means that the UK will continue being part of some things that the EU does, including having to pay into the EU budget. This could actually complicate things as the EU is trying to design its new economic recovery through the EU budget. Does that mean, on the other hand, that maybe the gamble of the Brexiteers will pay off, and actually it will be the EU that will first move to give some wiggle room to find a political solution within 2020? Traditionally, the EU does not do that. The EU really allows bureaucratic, legalistic processes to run their course. But let's keep an eye out for the EU summit, the EU Council, at the end of June. Many people say that this will be the last council that will take place via Zoom, by teleconference. Perhaps after that the pandemic will ease in Europe enough for leaders to finally meet in person again. But in that council, Brexit will be discussed, and then maybe it will be the EU that will take the first step in actually creating at least some space for discussions to continue for the rest of 2020. Otherwise, if they don't, we already know by this summer that an agreement will be very, very difficult to find at the end of 2020. So whatever happens, of course, the Brexitometer will be here to give you all the answers, to give you its assessments, particularly about how these things are all seen from the perspective of the UK. You can always send us your questions on social media using the hashtag Brexitometer. Until next time, and hopefully by next time I will have been able to get a haircut, take care, stay safe, and stay healthy.
We shall fight in the field.
Mit der Akzeptanz der
Décidez pas parce que
4
les Britanniques
Grundfreiheiten und dazu gehört
ont
auch
décidé
die
de sortir qu'ils ne doivent pas
Freizügigkeit
être
der
associés à ce
Personen.
processus.
Brexit means Brexit.